Doing an open air circus in a global pandemic was new to us. We, had done open air tours for several years, traveling all over the city, playing different parks, different communities. But so much of what we did relied on everybody being packed together. Even if you're in a big park, you're sitting right there next to your neighbor, elbow to elbow, with the performers right there, a few feet away from you, and many times the performers breaking the fourth wall and shaking the kids' hands and high-fiving, or having audience jump into the ring at the end of the circus. And we knew right away that that was off the table. It was going to look very different. Initial plans for 2020 were, as always, to put up the magical purple and blue big top and travel all across Chicago and do a show. Do a circus. When we initially heard about COVID and the city and the statewide lockdown, I think like a lot of folks, we thought, well, the tour isn't for many, many months. We're going to be fine. We're going to be fine. Then as, the months ticked by and the numbers went up in terms of people infected in more countries and more cities, we realized that the circus was going to be impacted and greatly. We might not be able to do a circus in 2020, so it was a heart-wrenching moment. As the calendar days clicked away, I have to give credit to the Chicago Park District and our community partners. We were in contact the whole time. We were always talking about, well, what are the possibilities of doing something? And if we could gather, and if we could bring a little bit of joy to our city, what would it look like? Fortunately for us, we started without a tent. We were open air for our first 3 years. It was, open air circus. So right away we kind of reverted back to that. We thought, well, we're going to go back to our roots. If we can do it and do it safely with the support of the city and the state, we could possibly do an open air circus. So we went into planning mode. We kind of circled our wagons in-house and worked with our core committee and all of our key people. And then we also worked very closely with the Chicago Park District and the health departments from the city of Chicago and the state of Illinois, and of course all of our community partners. And we really had to plan a safe, spectacular, socially distanced, fully masked, open air circus. So we had to really start at square one. What did rehearsals look like? Could you safely rehearse a circus? And then once rehearsals were accomplished, what does it look like transporting the circus to a different park each weekend? So we started off with a very strict quarantine for all of our performers. All of our performers had to go under about a month-long quarantine before we even got together for our first rehearsal. We used to rehearse, we would gather in our little rehearsal studio right here, which is not very big at all. We would cram 20, 25 people in here. I mean, you'd literally be sitting on top of people while someone else was flipping over your head. That was out of the question. We had to take all of our rehearsals outside the studio, out into the open air, into our backyard, into the park. We had to find a bunch of space where we could practice outside and socially distanced and masked. There weren't any big group acts where performers were actually touching each other or even that close to each other. If we had a partner act and they quarantined together and they lived together, then they could touch in the ring and do their act. But otherwise, we didn't have that close physical contact. Keeping everybody safe was job number one. I mean, the acrobats had to be safe, and our technicians and our crew and our creative team. So we had very strict rules, and we had that strict quarantine at the beginning, and then everyone was tested prior to the quarantine, during the quarantine, then right after the quarantine before we got into the rehearsal process. All of our performers were tested at least once a week during the rehearsal process. And we also mandated, and our cast was great about it, there was no public transportation, there was no sharing of vehicles, and there was no interacting with each other outside of rehearsals unless you were living and quarantining together. We did all the things that you needed to do, quite frankly, to keep each other safe during that entire rehearsal process. Our director, my wife Julie Greenberg, she was actually out of the country at the time, and for any number of reasons could not come back for rehearsals. So she was very socially distant, and she was directing from Canada via a live stream. I have to say that every one of our cast members took it really seriously. They wanted to keep themselves safe, obviously, but they also wanted to be able to deliver a spectacular circus to the community and do it in a safe way. It was a tremendous responsibility, and they took it very seriously. And we also knew that we were one of the first arts organizations in the world that was going to attempt to do a live performance, a series of live performances, across a city, a major city. And so we took it incredibly seriously. Doing a pandemic open-air circus is very different than how it was with the Big Top. We used to all gather early in the morning in the park. There'd be coffee and donuts and a lot of interaction, and then we would build up the tent and the surrounding, the concession tents and the snow fencing and everything we needed. And then the tent would be there overnight till the next day, and then we'd do a couple performances. So the tent lived the whole weekend there, but that wasn't possible this year. We knew we had to be able to come in, set up the entire circus that morning, do 2 shows, 2 shortened 45-minute shows. So we could do a show, clear out the audience, sanitize everything that needed sanitizing, bring the next audience in, clear them out after the show, take everything down, and clear the park. All that had to happen in one day, basically one afternoon, because we couldn't do evening shows either. Once the sun went down, we had to be gone. Obviously, we had our safety measures, in-house for our rehearsals and our staff and our acrobats, but we also had incredible safety measures in place for the audience. We had a certain quota in terms of how many people could be out in the park in the open air space. We had defined seating areas, seating pods, but they were very big. We had 6 different pods, and within those pods, we were only allowed a limited number of people. And then within that pod, people had to be socially distanced and masked. And then we also had a buffer zone between each pod, so that the distance between us and the audience and each individual audience member or audience group was really vast. It was a massive playing space. We also had a unique ticketing situation. We fundraised tremendously, and we made all the tickets free. We knew that even a $5 ticket price, which we do at times, might be unattainable for people. So we worked with Eventbrite, our ticketing partner. You could log on, and then you picked your pod, and you signed up for your tickets, and then you got it on your phone or your computer, ideally your phone, and then you knew exactly what pod to go to. So when you showed up to the park, and then there was a big sign at the entrance of each pod, so you had to interact with nobody. And then we had our giant foam staffs that were colorful and fun, and those were at 6+ feet long, and so we knew in between each person we'd hold that staff, and then the next party would be sat. So we had very strict protocols. We also had everybody's information, which was very important. We had their name, we had their email, we had their cell phone, we knew which show they were going to, we knew which pod they were sitting in. So in the event that there was a positive test from someone, we could contact trace appropriately and quickly. Being in charge of keeping 300 audience members and dozens of volunteers safe is a whole another ball of wax. And I have to say, Zoe Kennison, who is our program coordinator, that was her job. It was her job to keep hundreds and hundreds of people safe at the circus during a global pandemic. And she did it so incredibly well. I mean, she literally wrote the book on how to do live entertainment and bring the audience in and keep them safe. And also not just with the audience members, but then to recruit the volunteers and make sure that they understood that even though they're volunteering, that safety and professionalism and courtesy and kindness is of the utmost importance. Some folks who actually volunteered the first weekend, and then they said, I had such a great time, and this felt so organized and professional that can I volunteer each weekend? I get out of the house, I actually get to see some people, even if it's at a distance. I'm part of something that is done so well. Can I volunteer each weekend? The interesting thing about Midnight Circus is, the audience, the communities that we play, they tend to take ownership of Midnight Circus because they help us present it year after year after year. They grow their kids up at the circus. They take a great pride in being really part of the Midnight Circus family. And so when we talk to them about kind of what it would look like. They understood completely. They were grateful that we were doing something because the communities really needed a boost of joy. And they were even more grateful that we were putting in these really strict safety protocols. And it really did go off without a hitch. They were more than happy to help volunteer in a safe manner, and they really helped us present a spectacular, safe, open-air circus. There are a lot of things we had to do different. I think right off the bat we realized at the end of every Midnight Circus, and this happened spontaneously 12, 15 years ago, we always say, do you want to join the circus? And the audience goes, yeah. And then one year they all ran into the ring. 500 dancing with it. It was just a beautiful, spontaneous, cathartic moment, and that has become a tradition in Midnight Circus now. You know, children and adults get ready to run into the ring. We realized we couldn't do that. We weren't going to be able to invite them in the ring. And I think some of the audience members, you could see the look in their eye, you know, kind of through the mask, that at the end of the show, they weren't going to be able to run into the ring. And I saw a few adults have to grab their kids' hands and remind them that they couldn't run into the ring. That was a bittersweet moment. The end of the show was definitely different, and then the beginning of the show had to be very different, because generally we have a couple of our clowns, and usually Julie, who is not only the artistic director but an acrobat and clown herself, they would always run out through the curtain and get the audience going, clapping and stomping and hooping and hollering before the show. That's Midnight Circus tradition, and it's very intimate. And you know, they would hello, and the audience would hello right back, as you can imagine. That was not an option. We couldn't do that. We couldn't start our show like that. So we had to start it in a more intimate fashion, and we did, and it worked really wonderfully well. It was kind of bittersweet, and it really pulled at the heartstrings. But we did find a way to have that Midnight Circus, you know, kind of group number in a socially distant sort of way that really the audience, they felt it. I mean, they were up on their feet and they were clapping and they were dancing with us, because we did our big, we brought in our dear friends, the Chicago Boys acrobatic team. Tim Shaw and his team came back to the Midnight Circus family, and we put together a big acrobatic jump rope, which is their signature routine, but many of our acrobats jump rope as well. And it also, the ropes are so long, you know, the ropes are 25 feet long, at least. We're able to be that far away while we're spinning the ropes, and then the acrobats in the middle of the ropes can do all these amazing tricks, and the music is pumping. So we were able to capture that kind of Midnight Circus group, high energy finale aesthetic without being on top of each other, and the audience loved it. Loved it. Midnight Circus is always it's an emotional weekend. You know, we have such an intimate relationship with the communities we play and our audience members. So many of them, we've seen these kids grow up year after year after year. This year it was even more emotional. There was this kind of unspoken bond between, you know, the audience, even though they were further away than they've ever been. And even though they had masks on the whole time, you could see the look in their eyes, and you could literally feel that smile beaming through that mask coming across to the park. People were so grateful that we were able to do something. And we were so grateful that they trusted us and they wanted to be a part of it. You could just feel that appreciation and that love through the mask and across the great distance of the parks. It was really a beautiful experience. What can we expect for 2021? Well, we are in talks right now with the Chicago Park District and our community partners, sponsors, and we're figuring out what is possible. We think it will look similar in the fact that it will be open air. I think we all can understand why it's not going to be safe to get back under a tent and cram 600 people elbow to elbow. But we are hoping to add more communities and more shows in more parks to the tour. Last year we were able to do 4 parks, 2 shows a day at each. So we hope to expand that, maybe even double it, reach more people, inspire more people. and we may be able to have some more, the audience may be able to be a little bit bigger. Really, it depends kind of on the safety protocols from the city and the state and what we're all comfortable with too. But if we can reach a few more people per show, that would be wonderful as well.